This is the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gordon. Hey, what's up, Menopod? Hey, I'm still training for the Falmouth Road Race, and it's just a couple of weeks away. And to be honest, I feel like I'm not ready. I'm not loving my workouts, and some days I've been skipping them. And that doesn't help my stamina, and it doesn't help with my negative self-talk either, because I start saying things like, I should do this or I should do that, and telling myself I'm bad for skipping my workout. Have you ever wanted to do something but then didn't put in all the work required, so you fell short of your goal? Feels like that's where I'm heading right now if I don't get off my butt and get back outside. But sometimes we have to do the things that we don't want to do in the moment to get the future we desire. Now, it starts with one step. One small decision. Sometimes it's just getting off the couch and going for a walk around the house. It's got to be small. And it's so small you can't fail. And when it comes to menopause and life, the only constant is change. And what I'm here to tell you is that change is possible, but it won't happen overnight. First step to change is making the decision to change. But then we've got to back that up with action, right? And that's the big challenge. How do we take any action? And even more importantly, what actions should we take? The menopause movement is here to help you with all of that. Menopause can be a time of misery, or it can be a time of unapologetic action toward creating a life we love. Now, I woke up in the middle of my menopausal journey hating myself, my body, and the life I had created. I didn't know what to do, so I went on a quest to find out how to make change happen. The result was the menopause movement and this podcast. Now, the menopause movement has one purpose: to help end the suffering caused by menopause through transformational education and coaching. We want to help you too. So head on over to menopausemovement.com, take the quiz there, and not only will you discover your type, but we'll also tailor some offerings to help you take back your life from menopause. Getting into the driver's seat of my life was the first step I took to overcome the changes that I had experienced with menopause. But I did it alone, and it was really lonely. The menopause movement has created a community of women who are unapologetically deciding to become their best selves, one small action at a time. And you can too. Join our community and start to create a life you love. Today, we're going to be talking about depression. More specifically, how to get yourself out of it, brick by brick. Zack S. Rutledge is my guest today, and we have an insightful conversation about how to unfunk yourself. Zack is an ACE certified personal trainer, an ACE certified fitness nutrition specialist, and a certified brain health trainer through the Functional Aging Institute, and has practiced yoga for almost a decade. He holds an MA from American University in Washington, D.C., and starts his licensed professional counseling graduate program in January of 2022. He's the author of the official Depression Relief Playbook, Real-Life Strategies from a Guy Who Has Lived It. His book details the effects of the conventional, non-conventional, and unexpected treatments, and provides a defined action plan which attacks depression and anxiety on the physical, mental, and emotional levels. Simple, actionable, and concise, this book will save you years on the struggle and provides you with a shortcut to live the life you deserve. It's truly an insider's book on depression and how to beat it. And during the podcast, we talk about Zack's history of depression, building himself back up brick by brick, finding gratitude when life seems hopeless, 1% improvements, the role gut health plays in healing from depression, how we speak to ourselves and why it matters, yoga and meditation, how to help when someone you love seems depressed, forcing your personality and finding out who you really are, and stay to the end to find out the steps you can take to get out of depression. At the end of the episode, visit menopausemovement.com/podcast, where you can find the show notes plus the links to the books and resources mentioned in the episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a written review, like and subscribe on YouTube, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, so you're always the first to know when each episode is released. Now, who should we have on the podcast next? Please let me know. And what can I do to make it better? I want to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram at Dr. Michelle Gordon, DrMichelle or on Facebook, also Dr. Michelle Gordon. And when you send a DM, it's going to be me. I'm going to be answering it, not someone from my team. You can also send an email to drgordon@menopausemovement.com. Thanks again for being a part of the menopause movement today. Now let's get to Zack. So, Zack, welcome to the Menopause Movement podcast. We don't get a lot of guys on our podcast. We've had a few who, specifically help women, but it's super exciting because you came through depression. And one of the things that happens to women in menopause is as estrogen starts to leave, our brains react in a way that makes us a little bit unpredictable, not only in moods, but in our motivation. And so I'd like to get your story first, like where you live, who you serve, what your story is, and let's hear a little bit about your depression and what happened there.
Yeah, sure. Well, I live in New Jersey. I've lived here most of my life, except for I went to grad school in Washington, D.C. But aside from that, looking back at my childhood, there were no capital T traumas. There was, I want to say a normal childhood, quote, normal childhood, but it was very stable is what I mean by that. And, it wasn't until my teen years when I started to hit some bumps, but I just assumed I was a moody punk rocker. That was just what I thought. And it wasn't until I was 18, it was the summer after high school, and I call it the perfect storm. So we had just graduated. My best friend was killed. All of my friends were leaving for college. My karate school was closing, which I had been in since I was 10 years old. So all of my social support was gone. And there tends to be, for a lot of people, this pattern where quirks, let's say, manifest late teens, early 20s, things like depression, anxiety, OCD, things like that. That all kind of clobbered me within 1 month. So quickly failed out of college. And really, since then, it was, well, I don't want to say since then, but it was a brick by brick, building myself back up. That's really what it felt like, brick by brick. It took me about a decade. And then the other part of this mission, I guess, is now I just kind of shift to helping other people. So,
well, let's just unpack this a little bit, because you had a lot of traumas with a big T happen all at once, just when you were older instead of younger, right? So your best friend gets killed. What happened there?
Car crash.
I'm sorry. And then, your dojo closed, right?
Yeah.
Was it going to matter to you if the dojo closed, since you were going off to college anyway?
I was actually going to a local college, and partially because I wanted to stay at my karate school. So I was still going to live at home and just commute. And it's hard to explain to people who haven't lived it, especially through their teen years. Your heart lives there, it feels like.
Yeah.
And when that drops out, it's really tough.
Okay. All right. So let's just talk about what happened. So you failed from college. I mean, that's so near and dear to my heart, because I went off to college too. And I thought I was one thing. I went to this small school in Seattle, actually, because I grew up in Washington State. So I went to Seattle Pacific University, which is a small Christian college. I went there with my best friend and found out that my best friend, wasn't that interested in me anymore, because she was doing her own thing, like basketball. And I realized that I had very little in common with these people, and I hated living in the dorm. And I would have failed out, but I quit before. So I had to, grow up, right? I had to, and I had to make up for the fact that I goofed off a lot in high school, we'll say. And I recovered as well. But I want to hear from you, so you failed out of school and you're 18 years old. You had to go back home, I assume? Or you were already living at home?
I was still living at home, commuting to school, And I say I failed out. I dropped a few classes. I thought to myself, maybe I could take 2 or 3 of my favorite classes, keep those on. And those I failed. So I said, okay, I just need some time away from here. Yeah. And really, it was about a full year where I did nothing. I was in my bedroom doing nothing. Yeah.
That's like the classic, I think that's the classic description of depression, is just sitting around doing. And I really feel for you. When I was first pregnant, I didn't know who I was. And I wasn't going to college because I couldn't stay in school because my brain wasn't working. I had baby brain. And I would sit at home and just watch TV, and all of a sudden the day was gone, and I would be like, okay. And it was just those days just kind of roll together. It's just one phase. It's it was that lost time.
Yeah,
example,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So you did a really good job of describing depression. You just did nothing for a year. And how did that...
Which actually sounds like a vacation for a lot of people, but it wasn't a pleasurable experience.
No, coming out of depression is really hard. And I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to really look at all the things that we're choosing to believe at the time. And a lot of depression, I think, has to do with, now this is not clinical diagnosis, so there is a clinical depression that is medical, and I'm not going to go there. I'm talking more about our thoughts. And I think a lot of depression has to do with how we choose to identify ourselves. And the way to get us to start to climb out of depression is the first step, I think, is recognizing it. And then after that, it's like finding a brick and putting it in place,
Absolutely.
just like you said.
Absolutely.
So why don't you tell us about those foundational bricks that you started to lay down?
Okay, so you're going to love this one because so I was in my room, and to kind of add to that description of depression, it felt like all of the color drains out of your world. Yeah. So it's not like you're just kind of resting for a year. It feels like there is no more joy. Just to kind of add to that, in case there's people out there who haven't felt it. It's hard to put into words, but anyway. So I did realize a few months in that I needed to start sharpening my mind a little bit. I needed to do something. So I said, okay, I need to at least be able to focus on something for a little bit of time. I can watch TV for a half hour. That sounds good. And I did the worst thing possible. Started watching the news.
Oh, no.
Because I thought, well, smart people watch the news, informed people watch the news, I'll start watching the news. And I quickly realized I don't need to know about every murder in the tri-state area. So that was a bad move. Yeah. And it wasn't until I was still kind of in and out of bands at that time, just trying to get some traction and some kind of stability. But I just kept quitting because I couldn't handle the pressure, very small pressure with local bands. And I ended up playing in this band with these guys who were really into working out. And working out for me was like a byproduct of karate. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll join these guys. And I started lifting weights. And so to put things into context here, I'm 5'9" and I'm 170 pounds, which is like ever. And I work out 6 days a week because I'm a personal trainer. So it's not like I'm carrying, any weight that I don't really need. So, okay, fine. At the time, 5'9", 123 pounds.
Whoa.
So yeah, I was almost 50 pounds lighter. So Getting into this working out, I think they were pushing me a little more than they would the average person. And when I could see myself building that muscle relatively quickly, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I have a little bit of control here in my life. I don't have to have this skin and bones. And it wasn't just that. It was partially the camaraderie, partially the having fun and learning. I have fun learning things. So I was interested in things. I was reading books on working out. I was like, oh, so it kind of gave me that was really the first brick. That was something I could kind of sink my teeth into, and it was physical. It was something I could see. Mm-hmm. So that was the first major step in the right direction.
That's so good. So usually women who go into depression gain weight for the most part. It's really rare for women to lose weight in depression. I mean, not all. There are some women who will get emaciated while they're, depressed, but for the most part, it's our big thing. Our big thing is body image and that's the external forces that come from the media and from our families and all those things. But it's the same thing though, because when you start to move your body just a little bit every day, you can start to feel like you've got some control over something. Yeah. Right? And I think the whole bit of depression is that just this feeling like it doesn't matter what I do, it's just all going to beat down on me no matter what. Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was, and there was also the nice bonus of I wasn't getting sick all the time anymore. I was getting sick a lot because I was so underweight. It's like, oh, wow, this is and feeling that little bit physically better. It made a big difference.
Yeah. It's really funny. I mean, even one thing that I talk about a lot, podcast and in my programs, is I talk about 1% improvements, because 1% improvements don't feel like anything, but they stack. And so if you're able to improve even 1% a week, it doesn't feel like you're making any improvements. And all of a sudden, especially I'm a runner. And so for me to see the improvements in running when I just started doing it consistently, and I was able to, when I first started running, I was probably 50 pounds heavier than I am now. And I would run for a minute and walk for 5. And when I ran for a minute, my heart rate would go into the 180s. Right. And I was like, okay. And I wasn't even sprinting. I was just jogging. Okay. I was like, okay, I can do this. Okay, let's just keep going. And I'd come back and it'd been 12 minutes or something or maybe 15 and I'd come back and my wife would say, well, you that was fast. I'm like, well, it was a mile. What do you want? I just did a mile. I had to do something I could do. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and now, I mean, but right now it's the end of July and this probably won't air until October, but I'm training for this race, the Falmouth Road Race. It's a 7-mile race. And, I don't know, I'll finish it, but I don't know if I'll walk some of it. It doesn't matter because I just want to finish it. So, I mean, I've done it before, but the point I'm trying to make is that when you're consistent at something, you can pretty much do anything.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the process, of course.
Right. And we have to start focusing on the process and loving the process. And that requires such a huge mind shift. And then there's something else you said about, the color draining out of the world, right? For depression. And what I like to tell people is that if you can find one thing to be grateful for, if you're feeling super, super depressed, because gratitude is the precursor to joy. And when you can start to find something to be grateful for. Like if you fell down and you're happy that you fell on a carpet instead of instead of the asphalt, just something simple like that. Finding gratitude can change your life, and it can change your mind like really, really quickly.
Which is really tough sometimes, especially when people are telling you, it could be worse. It could be worse. And you're like, oh man, it can get worse than this. And I understand they're trying to say practice gratitude, but you're like, oh man, I'm already at the bottom. It can be worse than this. I would have preferred if people had said to me, it can be better, right? And they gave me that little bit of hope, things, looking forward. Yeah. So it's tough to find that gratitude. It takes work. Yeah,
it can. The thing is that it can, it doesn't matter where you are in your life. I think it can always be better and it could always be worse.
Oh yeah.
And circumstances happen, and circumstances are neutral, and we get to decide how we choose to assign meaning.
Yes.
And when we understand that, when we get to that place where we can, in the moment, sometimes it's really hard. When something feels like it's really big, and then you look back at it, it's like, why did I act that way? Why did I fly off the handle about that stupid little thing? And that's just the part of the human experience. It's so amazing and lovely. So all right, so that was your first brick, was fitness. What did you focus on next once you started to gain some weight?
Oh, good Lord. It was I think it must have just been kind of that education part, because I like getting back into school, getting around people again. It's so hard to put into words for people who haven't experienced it. But even just being around groups of people can be extremely draining. It's really hard on almost physically. It feels like, where you just want to go to sleep after you've been around people in a classroom, and you know what I mean?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. So it was just working on getting around people and being in school. I actually transferred. Oh, geez. I think I transferred schools 4 times. And like kind of dialing in where I should have been. But I guess the next tangible thing that I could really sink my teeth into was getting my diet sorted out. And I'm a personal trainer, and I'm passionate about the physical stuff. And I don't mean to overemphasize that stuff, but it was nice having something that was physical and tangible, right? As like the first blocks. So really it was dialing the diet. Like you said, with mainstream media, I was so thin, one of the reasons, because I was taking the mainstream advice, not realizing that my body was different. And it sounds like a lazy answer, but it's true. Everybody's body is a little different. And the foods that I need aren't the same as the foods that somebody in the news needs. So I highly recommend that anybody listening, if they can afford it, get an allergy test. It made a really big difference in my life. I know my body has changed. So I know now if I have a glass of milk, it's not going to end well, right? But at the time, they were kind of more subtle. And I think there was this inflammation going on in my body that it wasn't contributing, right? It was that 1%. If I can get that inflammation out, right? If I can cut out those foods that aren't agreeing with me, and it's not necessarily an allergy, it can just be an intolerance. It's slightly different. But, there's actually a pretty popular theory that depression is mostly from the gut. Now, I think that's part of it. It's not all of it. And people are actually giving probiotics, because you create 90% of your serotonin in your gut, not in your brain. Again, part of it, not all of it. But hey, what the heck? Get the gut health in order. So getting your body dialed in, I think just recognize that your body is your body. It's not anybody else's. Getting the foods that work for you. So that was, it sounds so silly, when I say it out loud, but getting that allergy test and just sorting out the foods that work for me. It was that 1%. It was that next little brick that I could sink my teeth into.
Yeah, I love that. Remember that every one of us has unique DNA, and what may work for you may not work for me, and vice versa. And so I think that's really important. When it comes to diet, there's no one size fits all answer. And that's why these fads, we talked a little bit before we started recording about how if you want to lose weight, you can follow a diet. Somebody can tell you what to do, but unless you fundamentally change to the person who's already lost the weight, then you're not going to keep it off, because the person who's already lost the weight doesn't go back and eat McDonald's, and I think that's really important. And the other thing is something that we tend to really underutilize or under consider is the role diet plays in depression. And if you're eating a bunch bunch of toxic foods, you're going to have a lot of inflammation in your body. And the easiest and simplest foods to cut out of your diet that are toxic are seed oils and sugar. And I'm not an advocate. I'm not anti-sugar. I have no problem with sugar if you want to have it sometimes. The problem is that our brains crave it. That's, it's this whole thing about something that's only available seasonally, and it hits the center in our brain where we just want to come back and get it over and over and over. That's why after you have a candy bar, you want more. And the corporations, the food corporations spend millions and billions of dollars on testing the craving center. So that's why after you eat at a fast food place like a McDonald's or a Burger King or wherever, 3 hours later or 2 hours later, you're hungry again. They have the perfect combination of salt, sugar, fat, and crisp, to get you to come back. And if you think that there's no sugar in that barbecue chicken burger, all of that barbecue sauce is filled with sugar. And then you've got everything is coated in vegetable oil, which we've talked about a lot here on the podcast, with Dr. Kate Shanahan. And so I don't want to go into that too much, but that all goes back to our gut health. So it's all connected. And if you think about like how it used to be before we had the advent of the, industrialized food, right? Before Kellogg's and before Crisco, we were eating eggs and bacon for breakfast, and we didn't have any problems. Depression wasn't a big thing, and we weren't fat. If you think about like McDonald's, Disney had to make all of their rides bigger to accommodate bigger people.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because back when Disneyland opened, people were much, much smaller because they were eating eggs and bacon and things that were not coated in vegetable oil. So it's very interesting to look at the history of obesity in America and see how it's related to the demonization of fat and the advent of more sugar and vegetable oils in our diets.
Right. I take umbrage with the term vegetable oil. I know some people who, they don't have the time or they don't have the interest. They're like, oh, well, it's vegetables, They don't know what vegetable oil is. Yeah.
Vegetable oil is really seed oil. And the seed oils they go through a process that is very similar to how we deal with petroleum and gasoline. And there's a part where it's solid and then it's like a plastic and then it turns into a liquid because of hydrogenation. And there's a whole there's a whole stem of science that's created just to make soy oil more safe for humans. It's really bad.
Endlessly fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
Exactly. America, the home of the corporation, the land of the prophet. I love America and I love living in America, and I wouldn't want to have my base anywhere else. I think we treat our people great, but we also have the ability to do freedom, and we have the ability to be free in a lot of ways. And there's no limits here in the sense that if you have a dream, you can actually pursue it. There's not a lot of, caste. But we also are very, very, very driven by corporations, and a lot of money, to our politicians comes from the corporations because they want to make a profit. And so we have to think about that. Yeah, all right. Absolutely. So let's talk about the next rock or the next brick that you were able to put in place. Yeah,
they weren't necessarily in order. I could go two different directions right now because tell you what, I did get into some kind of supplementation just because it was important, and I'll very briefly touch on that. Mm-hmm. So I live in the Northeast where a lot of us are low on vitamin D. Not necessarily a causation, but there is a correlation between low vitamin D and depression. So I actually went on prescription vitamin D. Sounds crazy. I had to go on that because I was actually getting really small fractures in my neck from such low vitamin D. Craziness, right? So did that, started taking some omega-3s. Again, we want those healthy fats in our brains and just in our bodies in general. And also turmeric. Turmeric was I physically, really great. I feel like I felt that one. I felt that.
Yeah, it's an anti-inflammatory.
So, yeah. So
it's natural anti-inflammatory. It's great.
Fantastic. And just the thing is, when I recommend people research turmeric, you're going to want to look at it with. I like the supplements over eating the actual root. The root looks like a ginger root, but it's orange. And I like the capsules because it has the concentrated curcuminoids. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you'll see it as curcumin. And make sure you get the kinds with a little bit of black pepper because the black pepper, it'll increase the bioavailability. So your body will be able to adjust it. It won't absorb it. It won't just pass through. Otherwise, you can just put some black pepper on your dinner and you should be good to go. Love turmeric. I'll let that one go because we're getting, we've talked a lot about the physical things. Well, I think,
there's a really good opportunity here to talk about the use of turmeric in the land that gave the seed of spirituality, right? Mm-hmm. So spirituality comes out of India primarily. And turmeric is used in all the curry dishes with pepper, And there's some pretty good longevity there as long as they're not eating a lot of vegetable oil. So it's interesting to see, when you start to like look at the history of religion and history of longevity, it's really interesting. And the use of turmeric, there's not a lot of inflammation. People who are eating a traditional Indian diet.
It is. Again, endlessly fascinating when you start following those paths. Yeah. Really cool stuff. Really cool.
So you did the supplementation. You started working out. I mean, vitamin D, I think everybody needs it. And vitamin D is also, low vitamin D is also related to some cancers. And so it's really important that vitamin D is checked. I mean, I take vitamin D and I'm outside a lot. I get a tan every summer from running and whatnot, but I still take vitamin D. I mean, I'm in New York but the whole population is chronically low on vitamin D. It's just how it is. So you started taking supplements, you started working out, you fixed your nutrition, and then what happened?
That's like the physical end of it, right? And then I'm, trying to get back into school and things are kind of working out. Turns out I was a pretty good college student. I was doing pulling the all-nighters, things I'd never done in high school, because I just had assumed I was not one of the smart kids. I looking back now that I have the insight, it was just, there's a lot of mood stuff going on. And plus I was labeling myself. I was putting myself in this box of, I'm a musician. That stuff's all for them, but they can study their books, but this stuff is for me. And I would kind of disregarded everything, which when, not even for people with depression, people really should just kind of have their arms a little more wide open and be more welcoming to having an open mind in their lives, because there's a lot floating around out there that we can disregard. So for example, like yoga, if you think that that's for weirdos with weird outfits and that kind of stuff, which obviously that stigma has kind of gone away over the past 20 years or so. I don't know, but my grandmother, I remember, thought that was for crazy people. So, but just having that little bit more of an open mind. I know that's a little not very specific, but well, in my case. Yeah.
I mean, look, we make decisions about ourselves as children, things that we're interested in, things that we think we're good at. And we grow up thinking that that's the things we have to be, right? I was a musician. I was a singer in college. And I realized also, and I didn't think I was smart enough to go to medical school.
Right.
So I was studying classical voice. I was a coloratura soprano back then. And I studied classical voice and music theory and all those things. I said, well, let me just take a trig course just to see if I'm smart, And so then I ended up high scoring that class. And then I took a calculus course and high scored that. And I was like, oh, I guess I need to go to medical school. And that's how I got back into, and I was older. I started college back in, I was like 23 or 24 when I started college. I did 2 years of city college, junior college, and then I transferred into a 4-year college and then 4 years of medical school. So it was a lot of school.
Wow, look at that, right? You're a singer and you can do other things. You're not just one thing. You're a human being. Wow, pretty wild, right?
Right, yeah. And so I realized that all of I grew up with a lot of people like pushing me down, a lot of adversity, a lot of, you're not good enough, you're not smart, you're not this, you're not that, everybody else is smarter than you, all those things. And I realized that a lot of that was gender norms in my family. And that was just how the girls were treated, as less than. So when I got out on my own and started trying some things out, I was like, oh, and I kind of surprised myself. I don't have to be a singer. And then I realized it's funny now because here we are on this is a video podcast and, I'm in front of a camera a lot, but I had stage fright and I didn't like singing in front of an audience. I didn't like it at all. And I was like, this isn't fun. And so I ended up going to surgery, which is also very, very high anxiety.
Oh, I can imagine that.
But, and here I am now doing this and this feels very low stress to me compared to surgery.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. But the point is that we're never stuck. We feel stuck, but we're stuck because of how we choose to speak to ourselves. And that's been the biggest revelation that I've had over the past, 15 years, I would say, is that how I speak to myself matters, and whatever I say to myself, I'm going to believe.
Absolutely, which leads me to my next kind of less tangible brick, let's say. And it still has that little bit of a icky feeling to it. I found the self-help section in the bookstore. So, which most people avoid it because, that's for broken people, right? You don't go to the self-help section. That's for weirdos.
That's really interesting that you say that, because I've been reading self-help since, I don't know, probably my 20s. I mean, I was in my 20s when 7 Habits of Highly Effective People came out. It was all the rage, read the book, and didn't really do much with it. But I read Tony Robbins. I never thought, I've never felt that. So I want you to know that whatever's causing you to have that belief about it being icky, or, back then, that was just a belief. Right. So the self-help section is not there because for broken people. Right. And you figured this out, obviously.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I think about it now, like, well, what's better to be reading? I mean, I tend to be reading one other thing and then something that's going to work on me. It's going to improve my life and the lives of the people around me. That's the way I see it. Yeah. And it shook me out of that box that I'm just a musician, just like you were just a singer. Right. So it kind of shook me out of that box. Like, okay, well, I was just kind of trotting along through school, but maybe I can actually do something. Or maybe I can actually, set these higher goals that will just, involve playing big concert venues or things like that.
Sure.
So that was a pretty big one for sure. And also it was getting me away from the junk food TV, So I was filling my time, the spare time I had when I wasn't working or at school. I was reading these books instead of watching, I don't want to say names, but the Kardashians or things like that. Right. This junk food stuff that's not really
reality TV is so addictive and so stupid. Right. Because it doesn't matter. So do you remember when Netflix was just DVDs?
Yeah.
So yeah. And you could get the Netflix, now Netflix is just like right there. Right. But back then, I remember when I was in medical school and residency, I was living in Long Beach, New York, and I had started my residency. It was right after the Twin Towers went down. So I started my residency and then the Twin Towers went down. And I was living in this weird house and I was watching this Netflix. I watched that one about the prison, Oz. And I just remember sitting on the couch just watching that. And it was all I did. And so we don't recognize that we're in depression. I mean, I went to school, I went to work and whatnot, but we don't recognize we're in depression, I think, until we start to step out of it.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Because I've never really looked at it like that before, but I just remember watching this, just getting the next DVD and the next DVD and watching the series. And when I think about it, I was like, God, I could have been doing so many other things with my life at the time. And, but surgical residency is hard. I'm not going to, I'm going to give myself some grace there. Going through a surgical residency is not easy. It's a lot of work. So you got away, you started reading. So what was the book that was most influential in that time for you?
I'm sure a lot of it was the same stuff you were reading, but the big one for me, it was actually pretty recently, and it's very simple. It's Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Great book.
It's brilliant. So that almost kind of overrode everything. Like I was reading a lot of pretty good stuff and I was, Jim Rohn and just whatever I could get my hands on, just whatever popped out at me. Dennis Waitley stuff, just whatever popped out. But when I speak to people about books, I'm like, you got to get your hands on Mindset. That's the big one for me. That's the one that really can shake some people loose, I feel like. It's just, when you've read it, it's brilliant.
I read that book when it first came out, and I'm actually an auditory learner, so I read a lot of books through audiobook. Sure. And that book changed a lot for me. It changed the way I chose to think about things. I started looking at things from a different perspective. Like, am I looking at this from a fixed perspective? Am I looking at this more from an open perspective? How can I not have such a fixed mindset about everything? And the fact that it was all rooted in science, same with Brene Brown, right? The Brene Brown books are really good too, because it's all research. And so when you're a scientist like me, and then they're starting to say, well, we did this research and this is what the research showed and da-da-da. And then it gives you, for me, what it did was it gave me this opening to say, okay, what have people been saying about this from, before? And so now I'm kind of looking back at the older guys like Neville Goddard and Joseph Murphy and some of the, metaphysical spiritualists, of course, Yogananda. But it's really interesting because at the end of the day, it's all the same thing, right? Get into your subconscious mind. When you can get into your subconscious mind, you can change anything. But we have the science of yoga, and we can shift into yoga after this. But the science of yoga is to help us connect our left and right brains, and for us to get into that right brain where actually all the magic happens. But we live in the left brain because of written language, which is, really great book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, which explains why all the goddesses were murdered by the gods. It's a great book.
Whoa.
I can't. Yeah, no, it's a great book. It's the history of written language, history of religion. We have a patriarchy. A beautiful, beautiful book written by like an ENT surgeon or something. Yeah, great book. So let's talk about how you got into yoga and meditation.
So I was in grad school the first time, and I was doing a lot of working out, of course. And then I was like, well, it's a free yoga class. I'll pop in, see what this is about. That was why I took it. It was free. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So, no, I was taking another class. I apologize. No, this is what was happening. I was taking another class. That class got canceled, and I had to hang out for another half hour and take this yoga class they were having. That's what happened. I remember because it was totally by accident. I was with this girl. She was fresh out of high school. I was 30 or something. And we were in this room that was set off to the side of the gym. So there's a big weight room just outside of us with all these guys lifting weights on all these machines. And I said, should I hang out for this yoga class to this girl? And she said, I'll never, ever forget this. She said, you see all these guys out there moving all these weights around? They have no idea what fitness is. This is coming from like a 17 or 18-year-old girl. And I said, all right, I am in. I took that yoga class, and I had never been so sore in my life.
Yeah.
Right? So it wasn't the meditation aspect, which I kind of had a handle on just from my karate. I had carried that over with me, and I was finally getting back into that. But it was the physical part that kind of hooked me, and I recognized it was going to be really great for my injuries, things like that. And then it was kind of like they say, integrating all the limbs of yoga. Right? Again, really fascinating how complete yoga is. In fact, if you love somebody with depression, one of the best things you can do is say, hey, would you do me a favor and come with me to this yoga class? I'm a little nervous to do this. I'm a little shy. Because number one, you're going to get them feeling good. They're doing you a favor.
Yeah.
Number two, you're going to get them moving their body. You're going to have them having fun. You're going to get them learning new things. You're going to get them introduced to meditation if they're not introduced to that. Also, there's the whole social aspect. And you don't have a whole lot of jerks in yoga class typically. So, it's kind of like this multifaceted, really rich environment you can get somebody in. So that's one of my first steps. If like I said, if you love someone with depression, ask if they can come with you to a class. It's really a just great practice. And if anyone listening hasn't tried it, please give it a shot. You'll love it. It's great.
I like that. And I like to say that the best treatment for depression is exercise. The problem is getting off the couch,
Yeah. So it doesn't have to look like exercise, right? So yoga doesn't necessarily look like exercise. I'm actually lucky enough to where I moved across the street from a couple pickleball courts. Do you know what pickleball is?
It's like a handball or something. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a cross between tennis and ping pong. Okay, so it's like a bigger ping pong, but a smaller tennis.
Oh, okay.
It's all the rage in the senior centers. It's super good for your brain. It's so much fun. And it doesn't look like exercise, but you're moving your body. I've got to try pickleball.
Yeah, it sounds fun.
It is really fun. Really fun.
Sounds really fun. So you got into yoga. How did you get into meditation?
That was actually lucky enough through my karate. I remember being 14, 15 years old, laying down on the floor, going through these guided meditation, not even sometimes guided, sometimes not. So I was exposed to different types of meditation, which there are. And that was one of the most profound things I had gone through in my teens. Again, hard to put into words, but so moving and so important. And I'm just so lucky that I found it at such a young age. Yeah, just really, sorry, when I think about it, I get transported back to my karate school. Was an old meat locker. They converted into it. So it's just like this great old meat locker where we hung punching bags from the chains.
Like Rocky.
It was like Rocky. It was really cool. Yeah, and I remember laying on that dirty floor and just, getting sucked in. Amazing.
Yeah, it's really funny. I mean, I went through a phase where I did some yoga, and my favorite part was, of course, the end where we did Savasana, because I felt like I could do anything at the end of it. Yeah. I didn't love the yoga, and I come from ballet, and so I took a lot of years of ballet as a child, and so my legs turn out like this, and the yoga people are always wanting to make you go straight, and it's not very comfortable for me. Sure. But I do love yoga in the sense that yoga comes from India, and India is the seat of spirituality, and you don't have to there's so many different types of yoga, and one of my favorite types of yoga is just a breathing technique that can help you kind of get things in alignment and contact God or the subconscious or whatever. I don't want to talk about God today, but
sure, absolutely. But that's an important point, right? When we think of yoga, we think of bendy, stretchy, but that's not necessarily yoga. There are different types. There's Kundalini, which is almost purely breath based. There's a lot of different types. So so yoga is a pretty rich practice that isn't just the asana, they call it, the exercise part.
Yeah. So let's talk for a second about, you put on your outline here, forcing your personality. What does that mean, and how does that relate to getting out of depression?
So I was dating a lot of girls I shouldn't have been dating. And I was wearing a lot of clothes where it just didn't feel right. And I have a quick story for this. Sorry, I talk in stories. I remember after college, I was on my way to a job interview, and my idea of success was, the typical corporate business suit, whatever type thing. And I was driving, and I was wearing my suit, and I just started bawling, crying. Lost my mind. 27 years old in my car, just couldn't stop sobbing. And I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? It felt like the square peg in the round hole. And I was like, but I want to be successful. I want to be successful. And like, this is what it takes to be successful. I had that limiting belief, right? It's like, well, you can actually, there are a lot of other paths here to success. I don't have to wear a business suit. I'm not a business suit type of guy. And that's okay. I'm not the kind of guy who dates, the cheerleader. That's okay. It doesn't have to be a certain way. And it sounds silly right now when I talk about it. But, getting your mind out of these preconceived notions of what's the perfect girlfriend, what's the perfect job, what's the perfect thing look like. No, you can just do your own thing. It takes a lot more of like listening, turning that arrow inward as opposed to just hammering outside of you. Turn that arrow inward and just trust your gut more. I'm an ENFP, right? If you subscribe to the Myers-Briggs test, right? I'm an ENFP. So trusting your gut is a good idea. And I learned that through therapy, which was also a godsend, right? I was lucky enough to get into some therapy, which was a very big deal. And I do write about that in the book as well. That was a big turning point in my life. Trusting your gut, if it feels like the relationship is wrong, if it feels like this career path is wrong for a guy like me, maybe that means
I think we have a lot of preconceived notions about what things should be. We're not taught like how to manage our feelings, our emotions. And you may have gotten some of that through karate, because I think that they have in martial art, they're going to give you more like an understanding of your body. But when I think about all the things I've learned and really had to unlearn things that my parents taught me as normal, and trying to find out, who I am, right? What I have this like why is my hair like this? Well, it's like this because it's something I'd always wanted to do, and I waited until my 50s to do it. And I think I look pretty good like this, and I'll shave it all off probably in a couple days.
For anyone listening and they're not seeing it, it looks beautiful.
Oh, thank you. If you have ever seen a picture of me, I have no hair. And what's really funny is that I have hair. It's really, really short. So I have a buzz cut. And in the summer, I shave it down to the skin. And then it just goes back because I have a lot of hair. But a few years ago, say 2015, I had long hair down to the middle of my back. And I looked probably about 10 years older. And what happened was I started running in about 2016, 2017, I started running. And not only was my hair bothering me at night, like it was choking me, so I had to like tie it up and whatnot. But then I would go running and it would get really, really heavy from like sweat, and it pull my head back. I was like, okay, I got to do something. So I just cut it short. But then I was like, I really want to shave my head. I just wanted to shave it. And I'd never done it because I had all these beliefs about it. Like if I shave my head, I have to wear makeup every day. And I don't like wearing makeup. If I shave my head, I have to be skinny and all these things. And so I was like, you know what? That's stupid. And I'm just going to go do it. So I did it. Did it actually the beginning of 2020 in March, just before the pandemic shut down the world. So yeah, so that it was perfect pandemic haircut. I just got a clipper, and I just cut it myself. So let's hear about your book. It's called The Official Depression Relief Playbook: Real Life Strategies from a Guy Who Has Lived It.
Yeah.
So what prompted you to write the book? When did you print it? When did you publish it? That sort of thing.
It was COVID that had me write the book. So what happened was, when I was in grad school the first time, people had known my journey and with depression, and people were having a tough time, and they were like, so what did you do to kind of help you get out of this thing? So I would talk to them about it. Invariably, they would forget, and I'd have to write them an email. Same thing happened when COVID was hitting. People were reaching out to me. They were like, so what do you do? And I started joking that I'm going to write a book. And it started as a joke. And I said, you know what? I have so many people reaching out to me, just friends, and like forgetting things and asking me to follow up. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to write the book. So I did it, I guess it was September of 2020. So yeah, I'd lost my day job. I was still training people, and I do a small private where I take people for nutrition, and we weren't talking about nutrition. I'm a fitness nutrition specialist, but we weren't talking about nutrition. We were talking about other things, which essentially led me to starting my grad program coming up to become an LPC, a psychotherapist. So I wrote the book then, and the idea is I want this to be the kind of thing that people have. It's very short, and I want this to be the kind of thing that people can have on their bedstand, that they can come back to and read a few times because, you tend to forget things. And I want it to be kind of like that anchor. If they have that despair laying in bed, which I know I had, having those beds on my bedstand, that was like, oh, I have that hope sitting there right next to me. And it was like a comforting feeling. Yeah. That's what I want this book to be. So like I said, it's short, it's easy to read. And I talk a little bit, I know we talked a lot about the physical stuff, but I talk about things like therapy and even medication. I had a lot of preconceived notions about medication, which was the very last brick. When we were talking about bricks, it was the very last thing I had done. It was my primary care doctor who got me onto it. And she was like, look, if you don't like it, just stop. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know that was an option. I thought once you're on it forever. All these silly things I had thought. So yeah, I talk about that in the book as well. I'm trying to maybe get people less scared to do that. I know a lot of people who are afraid to go on medication because of things they believe, or they've heard stories from people who had been on it for 2 weeks. They had a bad experience for a week, and then they stopped taking it. They didn't give their body the time to adjust. So I go through my whole journey with the medication as well, which I feel like was I feel like that's one of the West's gifts to the world.
Medication can be very, very helpful in depression. I think that we have to really look at everything, though. As Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. So we got to start there and then, keep going. I mean, yeah, I'm a doctor. I do. When I was doctoring, I prescribed. Sometimes, I'm not a psychologist, but I spent a lot of time figuring out how to get out of suffering. Yeah. I spent a lot of time suffering. And so that's, I'm here to share that with the world for sure.
Yeah. It takes work. It absolutely takes work. And I have friends who kind of went at it from the other end, where I have a friend with really bad anxiety, and he started taking medication after, months of his therapist recommending it. And he said to me, he's like, I feel a little better, but I'm not all the way there. And I was like, yeah, dude, you got to do the work too. Like it's part of the puzzle. It's just like everything else, right? It's part of the puzzle. It's not all of it. You still got to feed your body right. And you still got to move your body, and you still got to, I'm a big believer in therapy. And I really think you need to talk about these things with people. And yeah, it's just another, but it was a very helpful brick. Around 8:00 at night is when my thoughts would kind of get dark. I could have gone my whole life without the medication, but my nights are a lot easier now.
Yeah, I believe that. I spend a lot of time really examining the negative self-talk that I have. And then if something comes back and it keeps coming back over and over and over, then I'll actually record myself saying the opposite and listen to it over and over. Because we have to understand that, the voice that it's in our head is not us. It's just a voice. Mm-hmm. And it's the culmination of all the judgments and the things that have happened. And maybe you had a negative parent or a negative person in your life that just kind of beat you down, but you don't have to stay that way. And that's, I think that's the biggest hope that we can offer here, is that if you're stuck in depression, that you don't have to be there. What would you say, Zach, somebody who's like, I guess, stuck in the inertia of the couch? What would be the next step that you would suggest that they do?
This sounds silly. They need to practice forgiveness. Of course, forgiving themselves. They need to, and this goes hand in hand with gratitude. They need to forgive other people for saying the stupid things they're going to say to you. They don't understand what's happening with you because they can't understand. Yeah. Your depression is yours. Everyone's depression is different. And in my book, I talk about them as flavors. And I've been through quite a few different flavors of depression, right? So everyone's is different, but I don't want people thinking, oh, well, mine is special. And so mine, there's no hope. The one unifying thing is we can all get out of it. And I really do believe that, but it takes work. And that was the biggest thing I needed a clear idea of, look, you can get out of this, but it's going to take work. You have to put in the work. If I could write myself one note to the 20-year-old me, that would be the first step. It's going to take work. It's not, part of it's painful, but it's fulfilling work. I don't want to say it's going to be pain-free. I mean, growth can be painful, but it's not work like you're out digging a ditch. There's real reward to this. So put in that work, and don't give up the fight. Really, it sounds cheesy.
No, it's not cheesy. I mean, I think we have to look at it from this perspective. Is like, if you don't do anything, you're going to stay where you are. And so it's really important to, take that next step, and you don't have to get it perfect. You just take the next step.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One thing I tell my clients when they're like waffling or when you do a lot of counseling with, whatever, I'm a coach, but people really argue for their limitations a lot. And so when I'm trying to get them to see something from a different perspective and they just really aren't, I'll say something like them, well, what if you wish you wanted to want to? And that helped me a lot when I was younger, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, was if I was feeling stuck in something and I was afraid to take any sort of action, it was like, I wish I wanted to want to. And then that would get things moving.
That's great.
So is there anything else you were hoping to share today that we didn't get to?
I just want to say, like, I really love how you're like a human. Like, I love how like you're a person. That's so nice. It's so refreshing because you picture surgeons and doctors and like they're all gods, right? They're all these perfect, infallible beings. But, you're here spilling your guts, and that's so helpful to people.
Yeah.
It's so helpful to people. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. I mean, the whole reason we have the menopause movement, the only reason we have it is to help ease the suffering of women going through menopause, because menopause comes on suddenly, it's unexpected, and it disrupts our lives in such a way that it can be really, really difficult. And so when that's what happened to me, and that's why I started the whole thing and left surgery to pursue this passion.
It's great.
Yeah. All right. So Zack Rutledge's book, The Official Depression Relief Playbook, Real Life Strategies from a Guy Who Has Lived It. Go onto Amazon and get it. We'll hook that up in the show notes. Zack, thanks so much for being a part of the menopause movement today.
No, thank you so much. It's a real honor being here. Thank you.
Yeah. And good luck with grad school. I want to hear how it goes.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Did you know that menopause is not a medical condition? Most doctors don't know this either. I like to say that menopause is the privilege of a long life. And to really take hold of our lives in menopause, we have to unlearn what society and the medical establishment has told us about menopause. This is why I've created this brand new course called Understanding Your Hormones and Managing Your Menopause. I want to show you how you can get on top of your menopause right now so that you can start to see it as the best time of your life. Now, this course is valued at $500 and is in the beta testing phase. And we're currently accepting applications for women to test it out for us at no charge in exchange for feedback and testimonials. But the best part is, because you're a podcast listener, you can bypass the application process and go straight to the front of the line. To register right now, simply visit menopausemovement.com/hormones, and we can get started together right now. Remember, you can get started right now at no charge to you in exchange for feedback and testimonials when you go to menopausemovement.com/hormones. And I'll see you inside the course. Thanks so much for being a part of the menopause movement.